I hope you guys are all comfortable. So, I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna talk for too long. I'm gonna tell you a bit of our story and run through kind of how we started the company, and then maybe talk a bit about some of the things that we learned along the way. I've got 8 points on the board that I think are kind of key summaries of what I've learned in the last 4 years in starting Uken Games, and I'd love to share with you guys. So, we actually started about 4.5 years ago, and I met my co-founder at an event just like this. I met him at one of the very first Facebook camps that happened in Toronto. So this was when Facebook was about 80 million people, not the billion that they were today, not the $1 billion valuation that they had even. They were, they had just raised a Series A, and they were relatively small. There were about 80 million people, and they opened up their developer platform to third-party developers. And they hosted one of the first developer camps in Toronto because there's a large concentration of awesome developers here. And I met my co-founder there, and it gets to one of my points, which is, you got to make room for serendipity. I just started talking to the folks beside me, and he happened to be there. And we talked about all the things that we were passionate about, all the things that were going on in tech. And trust me, the community wasn't as crazy or as large as it is today. The rooms weren't as big as this. There was probably about, 30 people in the room at the time that were making apps or making websites, that came together in this community. So it was really awesome to meet him. And the very first thing that we did was we built this really cool gifting app. So gifting was the first wave of apps that did really well on Facebook. It was called Twister Trick or Treating, and it was about a month before Halloween time. And what you could do is you could visit your friends' virtual houses and send them a gift. So you could send them a sawed-off head or an arm or something like that, and some weird candies that we had drawn. And at the same time, we were very fortunate enough. We hustled. We chatted with a bunch of advertisers, and luckily Nestle had some experimental marketing budget left in the year, because usually these big companies, they spend this stuff at the beginning of the year. They had about $10,000 remaining. And we said, hey, we've got this app that we just launched on Facebook. We're growing it. There's an opportunity to do some ads. Would you be interested? So at first they said, we're not that interested. Why don't you come back when you have some traction? So a week later we come back and we said, hey, we have about 1 million users now. Do you want to do some ads, or do you want to run a campaign? And so what ended up happening was you could gift your friends Nestle Kit Kats and Smarties and Coffee Crisps. And that worked out really well. We had built this really simple gifting app, where you would visit your friends' houses and they would send you a gift. And that's all it was, yet we hit about 1 million users in a week. And that was awesome. It was totally unexpected, and it was a lot of fun. We had made some money through ads, but the longevity of a gifting app is really low. The retention is really low, and the engagement is really low. One of the things we did to kind of spike it up was we introduced the leaderboard. And that was our first kind of foray into gaming. It made it really competitive, and the people that competed at the top for the top spots, for the top gift sender or gift receiver, super competitive. What ended up happening actually the day before Halloween was there was a 13-year-old girl, and she had written this script to constantly ping the servers and send gifts to her friends. And actually 6 hours before Halloween, she took down her servers. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was happening. It was crazy. And we had 1 million users using this thing. So we were just going nuts. We managed to get our servers back. We managed to bring it back online. And, people could gift to their friends again. We continued this throughout Christmas, and we did really well from that app. But we learned a lesson. We learned the power of gifting mechanics and game mechanics. And so we were looking for the next best thing to do after that app kind of died down after the holiday season. So we decided to make games. It seemed like a very natural step for us. And I was actually in school at the time. So we started and we launched our first game in February of 2009 called Superheroes Alliance. We built it took about 6 months. I thought it would take about 3 months. So that, speaks to another important lesson, which is everything takes way longer than you think it will. And that was something that took us a while to learn. But, to our credit, I was learning to code, and we were still putting a lot of things together. One of the things that we also learned throughout that process is that it's really not a sprint. You know, a lot of people get in. I talk with a lot of the young entrepreneurs, and a lot of people think it's just day after day. You know, you got to work 80 hours and you have to put in that much time, but you always burn out from that, and it's really hard to see that when you're just starting out and you're hungry and you're trying to get things started. And it's fine to kind of burn the midnight oil when you're on a roll, when you're, you know, building something really cool. We had built the initial gifting app that we launched in about a week's time, and that was a really intense week. So it's fine to do that from time to time, but really in the long run, and we've been doing this for 4 years now, it's a marathon. You know, you're in it. You're not gonna hit some sort of, you know, crazy growth curve right away. That sort of thing takes time. You might hit it, but it slows down. And so if you're building a lasting company, you really have to think about the long term and think about it as a marathon. Think about what's sustainable. So when we started out on Facebook, and there was a big opportunity there. And I think, you know, getting back to my point about serendipity, there's a lot of value in just being around, you know, in just doing what you've been doing and continue to think about your company and build it up. One of the things that I did early on when I was in when I was in university was I bought the very first iPhone off of eBay. They didn't even have this thing in Canada because the Rogers network didn't support it. But I paid $1,000 off of eBay to get the very first iPhone, and I thought it was the coolest device ever. I was showing it off in class. You know, it was great. It was great as a pickup tool for all the ladies. They love to touch it. You could flick things, and nobody had ever seen anything like that before. So I thought it was the coolest thing, and you know that's really what inspired us to get on the iPhone very early on when the App Store launched, because it didn't come prepackaged with an App Store, and that's how we made the transition to mobile as a web-based company, as a company that was solely based on Facebook at the time. So what we did was we built a really simple wrapper, kind of like PhoneGap for all the developers in here, and we ported our HTML5 app to mobile. We did it very quickly and very swiftly, and we built a pretty solid product at the time because there weren't that many apps. And getting on a platform early can make or break your business, or can make or break your app. You know, so we did iPhone, we did Android, we did Windows, we even did BlackBerry for all the BlackBerry supporters out there. And it was a great channel for us because at the time, BlackBerry had such a big user base, and they still do. They still got a huge user base with the people that use Curves and with you know, a lot of users in various countries around the world. One of the things that we failed to do early, and I can't emphasize this enough, is, you know, we took the mentality of just building stuff and getting started, and I think that works in some cases, but you really, at some point, you really have to think and define your vision. So if you're trying to build a sustainable company, you really have to have a passion for what you're doing and understand what it is that you want to accomplish. Do you want to be the biggest, you know, software vendor for enterprise sales around, or do you want to be the biggest gaming company around, or do you want to be the biggest, you know, entertainment company around? And being able to sell that vision, being able to talk about that vision, like it's, you know, it's something that you obsess about is really important. And I can't really emphasize that enough. That's something that we didn't do early on. And so what ended up happening was we struggled with raising money for a couple months, because we weren't that good at telling our story. We didn't have it all figured out. That's okay too. We moved on, but we kept it really lean. That's another theme I wanted to highlight. Our team was 2 people for a good year, and what we spent that time doing was iterating on our game, iterating on the game mechanics, and really becoming game developers. Because when we started, we weren't game developers. We didn't do anything. We didn't, you know, study at MIT for game design or anything like that. We just kind of picked this stuff along the way, and we learned how to design games and all the psychology and economics behind the game. That was really interesting. Since then, we've grown significantly. So over the last 4 years, we've grown our team to about 50 people. We're proudly situated in Toronto at King and Duncan, and we're looking to be a really large game developer. We think there's a lot of room in mobile, and we think there's a lot of room in entertainment in general. And so we're really focused on building out new games and building out this great network of gamers that we've already cultivated. another thing that we did really well, or along the way, that it's really ingrained in our culture now, is that you should question everything. You know, when I look at some of the game companies out there right now, you see the headlines. There's a lot of mixed results. You see the headlines from EA where they just laid off, 170 people in Montreal, or they just laid off the entire Vancouver, the entire Vancouver office of PopCap, and those kind of headlines. I can now kind of really understand why that's happening. And if you look at their structure, it's really simple. They're kind of over bloated. They've got, assistant producers, and all these mid-level positions that don't add as much value to the end product, to the vision of what they're actually trying to create and to what's important. And so that's one of the key assumptions that we questioned all the way through. We were really stubborn about it too, because it took us a good year to realize that we needed a project manager on our teams. We were very dev focused at the beginning, so we make it a rule to keep 50% of our teams as developers. But when we added the project manager that we currently have, and she manages all 5 of our ongoing projects, all of them, that helped a lot. But we really questioned whether or not we needed that role. We really tried to understand what we needed through that role, and that was an important part of our success. And we continue to do that about a lot of the new positions that we need to hire for, a lot of the the functions that we create, a lot of the games that we're creating, and a lot of the tools that we're building. I'll speak a little bit about people. We spend, probably, I personally and my co-founder spend probably 60% of our time recruiting people. And that's one of the most important things you can do. Even at 50, it's really tough to maintain a strong culture and maintain a strong group, as a lot of the, the bigger companies and even some of the earlier startups know. Finding the best people is really important. And so it's the best way to maintain that is just to maintain a really high bar all the way through. It's to be patient with the people that you are bringing on, to make sure that you're not rushing through these decisions, and to make sure you're getting a second opinion. Our interview process, the touch points are at least with 5 different people in the company, and that's important because you really want to understand what value this new candidate is going to bring, and whether or not they actually want to join your company for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons, and if they can actually be a positive impact and be accretive to the value of the company. Another thing we did well earlier on, and this was all serendipitous, this was just out of our own philosophies. We communicated often, and we were very transparent about everything. So within the company, everybody can see our financials, everybody can see our analytics, everybody has access to these platforms. And that's really important because it drives ownership, it drives empowerment. And if you're looking to empower your people and have a flat structure where there's a lot of distributed responsibility, that's really important as an element there. The best way to do that is to give them the tools they need and to give them the direction, rather than to try and micromanage everything that somebody is doing. And personally for me, that's been really difficult because I tend to be a bit of a control freak. And so by giving them kind of transparency to all of our data, and by communicating our goals constantly, and as well as giving feedback to all the different groups about what they're doing, we were able to, to grow our team and to grow our user base and drive through the vision and the goals of our company. And the last thing that I'll talk about is founding moments. So I heard this talk by Jack Dorsey about founding moments, and it actually hit a chord. It was really, really important because when you talk about a company, a lot of emphasis is placed around the founders and the founding story and what's that like. And what people don't talk about enough are the different founding moments within a company. And I think you should have lots of them, because that's how companies kind of thrive in the long term, is they find, ways to reinvent their business. And I'm always amazed about the stories that I hear about even the largest of companies, like IBM, for instance, just totally reinventing their entire business, having a new founding moment, and, growing and continuing to grow when they're already kind of really massive. And that's an important thing to cultivate within your company. It goes to speak to, the shared responsibilities that you need to attribute to every single team member, and give them the power and empower them to be able to create those founding moments to drive a lot of kind of new growth within the company. And that's really what keeps up the innovation. So yeah, no, I'm just going to kick off the discussion because I've been talking for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We'd like to open the floor to questions. So I'll hold the mic and get people to queue up if you're open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Here.
Are you familiar with the Valve handbook?
I am. I'm a big fan of that company, by the way.
Good. That's cool. My question is, of the things that they have in it, which ones do you think are compatible to your company and which ones aren't?
Are applicable?
Compatible. Or applicable.
So, yeah, so the question was, am I familiar with the Valve handbook? And for those of you who haven't read it, I would encourage you to read it. It's really interesting. They're fairly, I don't know exactly how big they are. I think they're about 300 people now or 400 people, something like that. But they're a really successful company that they started off as a software developer. They built Counter-Strike and Half-Life, and they built a hit game on the PC platform. And then they turned themselves into a distribution platform, and they're way bigger than the Mac App Store. They've got Steam, which is a distribution network for game. It's a platform for people to download games. And now they're trying to get into the hardware space as well. And I think at CES they demoed and launched some of their hardware products that they're trying to compete with Xbox and PlayStation to get into your living room. And I'm a big fan of this company. So they wrote this handbook. It's about 30 pages long. And any new employee that joins the company, they have to read the handbook. It's edited in a wiki style, so anybody can go in and change what they don't like about the handbook. And the company's org structure is the founder and everybody else. So it's absolute chaos. It's the craziest thing I've ever read. But what I found really interesting, just to kind of answer your question more directly, is there's a section there about wheels on desks, and how they like to think about teams. So because of the distributed responsibilities to everybody, you come in as an employee and you're supposed to figure out where you belong. And so they have wheels on desks so that you can move yourself around, see what all the different teams are working on, and where you think you can add the most value and where you're most passionate about. That's the project that you should move your desk to and work on. And if you feel like you hit a point where you're not adding value to that project or it's not interesting anymore, then, that's why you've got wheels on your desk so that you can move to another project and add value there. And they've obviously had a lot of success, just moving from a software developer to a platform is a crazy feat. And then, getting into other businesses like hardware is just really impressive. Yeah, well, I don't think we could do the org structure that they have, the crazy chaotic org structure where there's a founder and everybody else. I look at their team and it's just, they're all veterans there, and so I think a bit of process is really important. And so, hopefully someday we're able to kind of stay as flat as we are, but I don't think we can deal with the anarchy there. Yeah, hi.
Hi, what do you do to make women welcome in your firm?
Sorry?
What do you do to make women welcome in your firm?
At our company?
Yes.
So for a game company, we've actually got a really, I like to think, pretty good ratio of women to men. We don't think about it as consciously, but we have close to 20 to 25% women in our company. And I think that's awesome because I think it creates diversity. The types of games that we built aren't just for men. The majority of them are. We have 9 games right now. So the majority of our games, about 8 of them are targeted towards men, more so than women. But we've got a bingo game, and we've also got a Pokemon-esque type game, where the user base skews towards a female. And I think it's important just to have different perspectives and a lot of variety within your company. So, all of our events and all of our recruiting, they're very open, and we have women and men both represented. We're really happy that we have a good kind of mix.
I apologize if I didn't hear this earlier, but
Sure.
Did you guys go the funding route, or is it all based on revenue, your model currently?
So we raised we raised a seed round very early on, about 4 years ago, but we've been profitable for the last 4 years, and we've been growing off of that. So kudos to profitability.
Hi, thanks for sharing your experience with us. My question was about venture capitalists.
Yeah.
And what is your experience with them, if you had?
Yeah, sure. So I think with taking capital or raising money in any case, it's really important to understand who you're taking money from. You're not just taking money from them, you're engaging in a partnership that hopefully if your company lasts and continues and goes on, is a lasting partnership. They're always going to be there kind of by your side, and that's the type of partner you want. You want to make sure that they're the right partner. Just like, you would evaluate a co-founder, I would encourage you to evaluate your investors in a similar light, making sure that they can add value beyond just the money that they bring, and that their interests are very much aligned with yours, that they want you to, they want to see you grow out the company if that's what you want to do, and they're supportive in that sense. In general, I think that the venture capital community and the availability of funds in Canada has grown significantly over the last 4 years. When we started, there was literally not any capital available at the seed stage, and a lot of the big VCs, they were only funding kind of revenue positive and in many cases profitable companies. But now I think there's a lot more opportunities because there's a lot more appetite for risk. There's incubators that can help you with the process and connect you with the right networks. I do think that it's still much more robust in the U.S. though, and from talking with the different friends of mine who are entrepreneurs who have raised recently or in the last year, it's definitely easier in the U.S.
Great talk. So I have a question about gamification.
Sure.
I just want to get your thoughts on gamification, whether you think it's important or really worthwhile for non-gaming apps to use gamification, and also do you have any tips on what do you think are the best ways to gamify?
Gifting. So, I mean, gamification is something that's talked about a lot. It's a buzzword. If you break it down, all gamification is really like understanding the incentives behind what you're creating, behind the platform that you're creating, or behind the economy that you're creating, and understanding the motivations of users, and then kind of building a framework for you to align incentives and motivations and encourage people to, do activities that you think will be inherently beneficial for them. I think that's what gamification is, and that's really what the study of game design is. So, I think it can be a very powerful thing if you're leveraging it in the right ways, but you've got to have some core value. Just because you're slapping on a leaderboard for something that people aren't interested in doesn't make them more engaged. What it does do, though, is if you've got, a lot of intrinsic motivation for a certain activity, it'll accelerate that. It'll refine that, and it'll happen a lot faster because users will see that, and there'll be, an even stronger motivator because that's accelerated by a leaderboard or, social mechanics that work really, really well, or gifting. If you have to be more specific about the apps, I can give you some specific advice, but, leaderboards are very, very powerful things. Hi.
How did you raise your initial round of seed funding, and then when did you get lawyers involved?
What did I get?
Your first round of seed funding, and then at what stage did you get lawyers involved?
So we raised our seed round in 2010, so a year after we started the company, and we were actually already generating some revenue at the time. And we scrutinized all the terms. We knew our partners because we came out of an incubator that they were running called Extreme U. It was a predecessor to Extreme Startups. So we were familiar with them before, but we had our lawyers look at it, and that was after we got the term sheet and we had negotiated some of the terms ourselves. We got it to a point that we were fairly comfortable with it. And that's when we got a lawyer involved. But I don't think it's a bad idea to get a lawyer involved earlier. You should definitely get a lawyer involved before you sign anything. Yeah. Hi.
Michael, it's a great speech.
Thanks.
There's probably a lot of entrepreneurs here, and I know that the successful guys don't talk a lot about where they failed. Can you tell us where you failed before you became successful?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of failures. I can speak to a couple personal ones and then some on the company level. So in university, I wasn't technical. I went to business school and I studied finance. In first year, I worked at a company called Nortel. They failed miserably, by the way. And I spent 2 summers there. I'm just telling this story because I think it's an interesting story. I spent 2 summers there in the accounting department. The very first summer, they had a breakfast because they finally were reporting on time. So the CFO hosted a breakfast. They were finally reporting on time. Everybody celebrated. I went back to school. The next summer, they had a lunch because they were finally reporting on time again. So they had gone through 2 restatements, but point is, through those 2 summers, I had made some money. I made probably about 25 grand or something like that. And then in the beginning of third year, I decided to start a venture with a buddy of mine. We strung together, 40 grand it was, or $30,000, and we hired a guy off of Craigslist who knew Ruby on Rails, which was a new term to me at the time. It sounded really cool. It sounded really interesting. To build a really simple app that we had mapped out, we had done all the screens for, and we had done all the user flows. Luckily I knew how to play with Photoshop. And that was a total bomb because I didn't know anything. And we basically, it was $30,000 down the drain within, 6 months or whatnot, because I didn't really know anything and, I didn't know what I was doing. And hiring the guy was also a very wrong thing, because you can't have a contractor build your core product. You just can't outsource your core product. And so from that though, the positive thing was I learned a lot. Like I was still in school. I wasn't technical at the time, but it made me realize that code was really important. It was something that I wanted to build it as a core competency. So when I graduated, and even before I graduated, I started learning to code. It's really simple with all the resources around. It's intimidating at first, but there's more than enough resources around. There's classes, there's all these types of things. I just bought a book from Chapters just to learn, and I built a lot of our first game, and that helped a lot because, the type of company we are it's very internally focused. All we do is build products. We have 50 people, and 47 of them are product focused, product centric, and that's important to know what you need to be good at and focus on those things. An example kind of after the company, we've killed 2 games in production and then 1 game before we even launched it. And this was it was 95% done. The game costs, these days games cost a lot, but back then, $200,000 would have been a lot for investing in a game. And this is about 3 years ago, building a game on Facebook. We killed that game 2 weeks out before we were going to launch it, and we were 95% done. And we killed it just because the initial metrics that we had gotten with the very small seed user base that we had, they were poor. We couldn't do much to improve it, and we didn't feel good about it, so we killed it. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.